Let me say this clearly. While you're waiting for the right time, someone else is building. While you're hesitating, someone else is compounding. While you're distracted, someone else is positioning. And the scary part is happening right now. Not next year, not when you feel ready, not when life gets easier. Right now, I'm not here to hype you up. I'm here to wake you up. This isn't about quick wins or viral success. This is about understanding the quiet laws that are always working, whether you respect them or not. The world rewards focus. It rewards discipline. It rewards those who can delay pleasure long enough to build something real. If you don't understand that, you'll always feel behind. If you do understand it, you'll realize you're not behind, you're just undisciplined. Let's talk about 5 principles that are shaping your life as we speak. Your attention is the most valuable asset you own, and most of you spend it like loose change. You guard your money, you compare prices, you hesitate before making large purchases. But when it comes to attention, the one resource that directly shapes your skill, your income, your relationships, and your identity, you give it away without negotiation. That would be fine if attention were renewable in a meaningful way. It isn't. Time passes whether you use it intentionally or not, and whatever consistently holds your attention slowly shapes who you become. Think about how this works in simple terms. Whatever you focus on repeatedly becomes familiar. What becomes familiar becomes comfortable. What becomes comfortable becomes automatic. And what becomes automatic becomes your life. That is not motivational language. That is behavioral conditioning. If you focus daily on trivial content, shallow arguments, celebrity drama, endless scrolling, you are training your mind to crave novelty and distraction. If you focus daily on building a skill, reading, training your body, improving your thinking, you are training your mind to tolerate depth and delay. The brain adapts to whatever you repeatedly expose it to. The question is not whether you are being shaped. The question is by what. There is always a trade-off. 3 hours of passive consumption feels harmless because the cost is invisible in the moment. You relax, you laugh, you escape. But those 3 hours are not neutral. They displace something else. They displace practice. They displace planning. They displace reflection. Over a year, those hours accumulate into hundreds. Over 5 years, they become thousands. Skills are built in thousands of hours. Networks are built in thousands of hours. Physical transformations are built in thousands of hours. When you say you do not have time, what you usually mean is that you are allocating attention elsewhere. This is where opportunity cost becomes real. Every yes to distraction is a no to growth. You cannot build depth in multiple directions at once. Focus requires exclusion. If you want to master your craft, you must ignore other appealing options. If you want to build financial stability, you must sacrifice certain short-term pleasures. People struggle with this because the sacrifice is immediate while the reward is delayed. Human emotion prefers instant gratification. Long-term thinking requires overriding that preference again and again. Look at ordinary life. A young professional finishes work and feels mentally drained. Opening a social app feels easier than studying a new skill. That choice makes sense in the short term. Rest is necessary. But if that pattern repeats daily, something subtle happens. Months pass. Others in the same field begin to advance because they invested in new certifications, deeper knowledge, better communication skills. The drained professional is not less intelligent. They simply allocated attention differently. The market does not reward potential. It rewards applied focus. The gap between them was created quietly in the evenings, not dramatically in a single moment. Attention also determines emotional direction. If you consistently focus on what others are doing, how they are succeeding, what they own, how they look, you will slowly train yourself to compare. Comparison, when constant, breeds dissatisfaction. Dissatisfaction without action becomes resentment. Resentment drains energy, and drained energy reduces discipline. The cycle continues. On the other hand, if you focus on your own measurable progress, your habits, your savings rate, your strength, your output, you build internal standards. Internal standards create stability. Stability supports long-term decisions. Divided attention is another silent destroyer. Many people attempt to build something meaningful while constantly interrupting themselves. Notifications, messages, background noise, multitasking. They feel busy, But busyness is not progress. Deep work requires sustained, undisturbed focus. Without it, you stay at a surface level of competence. Surface level competence rarely leads to exceptional outcomes. The difference between average and outstanding often lies in the ability to concentrate without escape. That ability is trained, and it is trained by repeatedly choosing depth over distraction. There is also a psychological cost to scattered attention. When you start something and do not finish, your mind registers incompletion. When that pattern repeats, you begin to doubt your own follow-through. Self-trust erodes. You tell yourself you lack discipline, when in reality you lack structured attention. You have not designed your environment to protect focus. Devices are within reach. Entertainment is one click away. You expect willpower to overcome convenience. That is unrealistic. Serious individuals do not rely solely on willpower. They reduce friction for productive behavior and increase friction for distractions. They treat attention as capital that must be allocated intentionally. This might feel uncomfortable because it removes excuses. It is easier to blame external circumstances than to admit mismanagement of attention. Yet when you examine high performers across fields, business, sports, academia, the pattern is consistent. They guard their attention fiercely. They are selective about commitments. They say no more often than they say yes. Not because they are antisocial, but because they understand that diluted focus produces diluted results. You may think small distractions do not matter, but identity is built in small repetitions. If every day you prove to yourself that you cannot resist trivial impulses, you reinforce an identity of impulsiveness. If every day you resist at least one impulse in favor of a long-term goal, you reinforce an identity of discipline. Identity then influences future choices. A disciplined person is not someone who feels motivated. It is someone who has repeatedly allocated attention toward what matters, even when it was inconvenient. The uncomfortable truth is that most unrealized potential is not destroyed by tragedy. It is dissolved by distraction. Not dramatic failure, but slow leakage. Hours into days, days into years. You wake up and realize you are capable of more, yet you cannot point to a single catastrophic mistake. The mistake was diffusion. Too many minor compromises, too many evenings surrendered, too much attention rented out to things that did not pay returns. If you want different outcomes, you must perform a simple audit. Where does your attention go? Who profits from it? What skills are you compounding? What habits are you reinforcing? This is not about eliminating all entertainment or living without rest. It is about proportion. It is about intentionality. It is about understanding that focus is finite and that every allocation shapes your future position. The market of life responds to sustained value creation. Sustained value creation requires sustained attention. When you choose carefully where your attention flows, you are not just managing time. You are directing your trajectory. And trajectories, once set, are difficult to reverse. Most people overestimate their independence. They believe their opinions are self-generated, their standards self-selected, their ambitions deeply personal. But if you look closely at your daily life, who you speak to, what you consume, what behavior you tolerate, you begin to see a different pattern. Your environment is not just surrounding you. It is shaping you quietly, gradually, consistently. Human beings adapt. That is one of our greatest strengths and one of our most dangerous weaknesses. We normalize whatever we are repeatedly exposed to. If you are surrounded by people who complain about work every day, you will slowly begin to see work as a burden rather than an opportunity. If you are surrounded by people who speak about investment, discipline, health, and long-term planning as normal behavior, those standards begin to feel natural. The shift is subtle. There is rarely a dramatic moment where you decide to lower or raise your standards. It happens through repetition. Consider a simple example. A young man starts a job full of energy. He wants to grow, to improve, to earn more responsibility, but his immediate team operates differently. They arrive late. They do the minimum required. They spend more time discussing management's flaws than their own performance. At first, he resists. He maintains his discipline. But over time, the psychological pressure to belong begins to work on him. When he sees underperformance going unpunished, his internal urgency softens. When he sees mediocrity accepted, Excellence feels unnecessary. 6 months later, he has not made a conscious decision to lower his standards, yet his behavior mirrors the group. Environment, normalization, behavior, outcome. It is not dramatic, it is predictable. This applies beyond the workplace. Look at financial habits. If your social circle regularly spends beyond its means, new cars financed, expensive dinners on credit, constant upgrades, you will feel pressure to match that lifestyle. Even if you understand the mathematics of compounding and long-term investing, the emotional discomfort of appearing behind can override logic. So you spend. That spending reduces savings. Reduced savings, limited investment. Limited investment restricts future options. A few years later, you feel financially constrained and blame income, not environment. But the root cause was exposure to a standard that prioritized appearance over stability. Environment also shapes what you consider possible. If no one around you reads books, studies new skills, or discusses ideas, intellectual growth begins to feel unusual. You may still have curiosity, but without reinforcement, curiosity fades. On the other hand, if you are regularly in rooms where improvement is assumed, where people talk about what they are building, not who they are blaming, your own thinking expands. You begin to ask better questions. You begin to measure yourself differently. Standards rise through proximity. There is an emotional cost to this awareness. Outgrowing your environment often feels like betrayal. When you begin to change your habits, waking earlier, spending less, studying more, some people will interpret it as judgment. They may say you are acting different. In truth, you are acting intentional, but intention disrupts comfort. If your growth highlights someone else's stagnation, they may resist it. You are then faced with a trade-off: maintain harmony or pursue progress. Both have costs. Harmony may cost your ambition. Progress may cost certain relationships. Long-term thinking requires you to evaluate which cost you are willing to pay. This does not mean abandoning everyone who is not at your level. It means being conscious of influence. If you spend 5 hours a day immersed in negativity, do not be surprised when your outlook darkens. If you spend 5 hours a day learning from disciplined individuals, even indirectly through books or structured content, do not be surprised when your thinking sharpens. Influence does not require physical presence. Digital environments shape standards just as powerfully. The voices you allow into your mind become internal dialogue. Misplaced loyalty is another quiet trap. Some people remain in limiting environments out of obligation. They feel guilty for wanting more, but loyalty that demands self-sabotage is not loyalty. It is fear disguised as virtue. If your growth requires distance, less time in gossip-filled spaces, less engagement in destructive habits, that distance is not arrogance, it is boundary setting. And boundaries protect focus. There is also the matter of divided identity. When your environment conflicts with your goals, you live in tension. You speak about ambition, but surround yourself with complacency. You talk about discipline, but socialize in chaos. That misalignment drains energy. You are constantly switching between versions of yourself. Over time, inconsistency weakens conviction. You begin to question your own seriousness, not because you lack potential, but because your surroundings do not reinforce your stated priorities. Observe families where health is prioritized, meals are intentional, physical activity is routine, conversations about well-being are normal. Children raised in that environment often carry those habits into adulthood without dramatic effort. Contrast that with environments where convenience dominates. Processed food is standard, movement is rare. Health issues are discussed but not addressed. The long-term outcomes differ significantly, yet neither environment feels extreme from the inside. Each feels normal to its members. That is the power of repetition. If you want to change your trajectory, you must audit your environment with honesty. Who challenges you? Who excuses you? What conversations dominate your time? Are you frequently discussing ideas and solutions, or people and problems? Your answers will predict your future more accurately than your intentions. The uncomfortable truth is that willpower alone rarely overcomes constant negative influence. You can swim against the current for a while, but it is exhausting. It is more strategic to adjust the current. Seek rooms physical or intellectual where growth is expected. Limit exposure to chronic negativity. Reduce time spent in spaces that reward distraction. Increase time in spaces that reward discipline. These decisions may appear small. They are not. Environment compounds. Every day, you are being subtly programmed. The standards around you become your standards. The ambitions around you become your ambitions. The excuses around you become your excuses. If you do not choose your environment deliberately, you will inherit one by default. And inherited standards often produce inherited limitations. This is not about superiority. It is about alignment. If you want long-term success, your environment must support long-term thinking. If you want financial independence, your environment must respect delayed gratification. If you want mastery, your environment must value depth over distraction. Otherwise, you will live in constant friction between who you want to become and what you repeatedly observe. You cannot control every influence, but you can control proximity. You can control exposure, and those controls exercised consistently shape behavior. Behavior shapes results. Results shape life. Comfort rarely looks dangerous. It looks earned. It looks reasonable. It looks like a reward for hard work, and that is why it quietly reshapes your life without resistance. The problem is not comfort itself. Rest is necessary. Stability has value. The problem begins when comfort becomes the organizing principle of your decisions. When ease becomes the priority, growth becomes optional. And when growth is optional, decline becomes inevitable. You see this in small daily choices. A stable job that pays enough to survive but not enough to expand. It does not challenge you, but it does not threaten you either. So you stay. Each year you promise yourself you will learn a new skill, apply for a higher role, or start something on the side. But after work, you feel tired. You choose relaxation. That choice makes sense in isolation. One evening of rest is harmless, but repeated over months, the pattern forms. Comfort after work becomes the rule, not the exception. Skills remain static. The market evolves. Inflation rises. Expectations increase. 5 years later, you are in the same role, earning slightly more, but not significantly ahead. Nothing catastrophic happened. You simply chose ease consistently over expansion. Human beings are wired to avoid pain. Discomfort signals risk. Risk signals uncertainty. Uncertainty triggers fear. So, when faced with the choice between a predictable routine and an uncertain opportunity, most people choose predictability. The trade-off is rarely examined carefully. Predictability offers short-term emotional security. Uncertainty offers long-term potential growth. By repeatedly choosing short-term security, you trade away long-term upside. The cost is not immediate, so it feels acceptable, but opportunity cost does not disappear just because it is invisible. Look at physical health. A person knows exercise improves energy, mood, and longevity. The logic is simple. Movement strengthens the body. Strength reduces risk of disease. Reduced disease increases quality of life. Yet, after a long day, the couch feels better than the gym. The immediate reward of rest outweighs the distant reward of vitality. If that decision happens occasionally, it is harmless. If it becomes a habit, the body adapts to inactivity. Weight increases gradually. Energy declines gradually. Medical issues appear gradually. At no single moment does it feel dramatic enough to force change. Comfort numbs urgency. By the time the consequences become undeniable, reversing them requires far more effort than maintaining discipline would have. Comfort also shapes ambition. When you are surrounded by enough convenience, food delivered, entertainment endless, credit easily available, you can simulate progress without actually progressing. You can feel busy without building anything substantial. You can feel connected without deep relationships. You can feel informed without deep understanding. Modern comfort offers substitutes for achievement. The substitutes satisfy the emotional need temporarily, but they do not produce tangible advancement. Over time, the gap between perceived progress and real progress widens. There is also a psychological dimension. Every time you choose comfort over a difficult but necessary action, you send yourself a message. You signal that discomfort is to be avoided. That signal reinforces an identity, someone who retreats from challenge. Identity then influences future decisions. When a larger opportunity appears, starting a business, relocating for growth, investing significant capital, you hesitate more than necessary because your past choices have conditioned you to prefer safety. Small acts of avoidance accumulate into a cautious life. This is not an argument for reckless risk. It is an argument for calculated discomfort. Growth requires tension. Muscles grow under resistance. Skills grow under practice. Confidence grows under exposure to difficulty. When you remove resistance from your life entirely, you remove the stimulus for adaptation. You become comfortable at your current level of competence. The world, however, does not pause. Industries evolve. Technology advances. Competition improves. If you are static while the environment advances, you are effectively moving backward. Consider relationships. Comfort can lead to complacency there as well. Two people become familiar. Effort decreases. Difficult conversations are avoided to preserve peace. Personal growth slows because challenging each other feels uncomfortable. Over time, emotional distance forms. Neither person intended harm. They simply chose ease over honest communication repeatedly. Small avoided tensions compound into larger misunderstandings. The relationship weakens not from a single betrayal, but from accumulated neglect. The most dangerous aspect of comfort is that it feels justified. You tell yourself you deserve a break. You worked hard this week. You sacrificed before. You will push later. Each justification contains a fragment of truth, but discipline is not built on fragments. It is built on consistency. If you only act when you feel inspired, your progress will mirror your mood. Mood fluctuates. Standards must not. There is also the matter of time perception. When life feels comfortable, urgency disappears. Without urgency, long-term planning weakens. You delay investing because there is no immediate pressure. You delay learning because your current income feels adequate. You delay difficult decisions because the current arrangement is tolerable. Tolerable is a dangerous word. It keeps you in situations that are not aligned with your potential. Tolerable today often becomes regret tomorrow. To move beyond comfort, you must reframe discomfort. Instead of interpreting it as danger, view it as information. Anxiety before a presentation signals growth. Fatigue after training signals adaptation. Uncertainty before a strategic investment signals potential expansion. Not all discomfort is beneficial, but the absence of all discomfort is a warning sign. It suggests stagnation. There is a cost to stepping beyond comfort. You may fail publicly, you may lose money, you may face criticism, you may experience periods of instability. That cost is real. The alternative cost is less visible but equally real. Unrealized potential, financial dependency, physical decline, intellectual stagnation. You must decide which cost you are willing to pay. Avoiding all risk is not neutral, it is a decision with consequences. When you consistently choose small discomforts, waking earlier, saving aggressively, practicing deliberately, having honest conversations, you build resilience. Resilience expands your capacity. Expanded capacity increases opportunity. Opportunity, when combined with preparation, leads to meaningful advancement. The sequence is logical. Discipline, capacity, opportunity, growth. Comfort interrupts that sequence at the first step. The goal is not to eliminate comfort entirely, it is to prevent it from dictating your direction. Comfort should be a reward for disciplined action, not a replacement for it. When ease becomes the priority, ambition fades quietly. When ambition fades, potential remains theoretical, and potential, unused, does not produce results. At some point, you have to confront a difficult truth. Nobody is coming to rescue you. Not a mentor who sees your hidden talent and lifts you out of obscurity. Not a lucky break that solves years of inconsistency. Not a system that suddenly becomes fair because you feel ready. Waiting to be saved feels comforting because it removes pressure. If someone else is responsible for changing your situation, then your current position is not fully your fault. But comfort built on denial is expensive. It costs you time, and time does not refund itself. When people say they are waiting for an opportunity, what they often mean is they are waiting for certainty. They want a clear signal that effort will be rewarded before they commit fully. The problem is that certainty usually comes after sustained effort, not before it. Skills are developed privately, reputation is built slowly, financial stability is accumulated incrementally. There is no dramatic announcement that you are now ready. There is only evidence produced through consistent action. If you delay action until you feel chosen, you remain invisible. Look at how this plays out in ordinary life. Someone wants to start a business but spends months consuming motivational content instead of testing a simple idea. They tell themselves they are researching. In reality, they are protecting themselves from failure, because if they try and it does not work, they must confront their own execution. So they wait for more knowledge, more capital, more clarity. Years pass. Others with less preparation but more courage experiment, adjust, and learn. Those individuals do not have superior intelligence. They simply accepted responsibility earlier. Action, feedback, refinement, growth, waiting, overthinking, stagnation, regret. The same pattern appears in careers. An employee feels underpaid and underappreciated. They complain to friends. They hope management notices their effort. They believe loyalty will eventually be rewarded. Sometimes it is, often it is not. The market rewards visible value, not silent frustration. If you want a raise, you must increase your skill, document your impact, negotiate strategically, or seek a better environment. Complaining without repositioning changes nothing. It may provide temporary emotional release, but it does not alter your leverage. This is not about blaming yourself for every difficulty. External factors exist. Economic downturns happen. Companies restructure. Families face emergencies. But even within constraints, you still control certain variables. You control how you allocate time after work. You control whether you build a savings buffer. You control whether you improve your health. Responsibility does not mean everything is your fault. It means you focus on what is within your influence instead of obsessing over what is not. There is a psychological shift that occurs when you accept full responsibility. Excuses lose their appeal. You begin to ask different questions. Instead of, why is this happening to me? You ask, what can I do with what I have? That question is practical. It leads to small, controllable actions. Small actions compound. If you save even a modest percentage of your income consistently, you build optionality. If you study even an hour a day consistently, you increase competence. If you exercise regularly, you increase energy and resilience. None of these actions are dramatic, but together they shift your trajectory. Waiting for rescue also affects how you perceive effort. If you believe someone will eventually notice your potential, you may work inconsistently. You rely on talent to carry you. But talent without discipline decays. The person who assumes no one is coming works differently. They document progress. They build systems. They treat time as capital. They measure output. They do not depend on applause to maintain momentum. They understand that most valuable work happens unseen. Years of quiet practice precede visible success. There is also a social dimension. It is easy to blame the environment, the economy, or other people for your stagnation, and sometimes those factors genuinely limit you. But if your entire narrative revolves around external obstacles, you gradually erode your sense of agency. Agency is the belief that your actions matter. Without it, discipline feels pointless. When you reclaim responsibility, you reclaim agency. You stop waiting for validation. You start building leverage. Leverage comes from preparation. When an opportunity appears, prepared individuals recognize it and act quickly. Unprepared individuals hesitate. They feel unqualified. They second-guess themselves. The opportunity passes. Later, they describe it as bad luck. But luck often favors those who invested in themselves before there was visible demand. This is why responsibility is empowering. If you build skills consistently, even without immediate reward, you increase the probability of being ready when timing aligns. Consider financial independence. No one forces you to spend everything you earn. No one forces you to ignore investing, but many people do because immediate consumption feels better than delayed security. Years later, when expenses rise or income drops, they hope for assistance. Assistance may come, but it often comes with conditions. If you had taken responsibility earlier, living below your means, learning basic investing principles, building an emergency fund, you would face fewer constraints. Choice, sacrifice, security. The sequence is clear. Taking responsibility also requires honesty about effort. Many people believe they are working hard because they feel busy, but busyness is not necessarily productive. Responsible thinking asks, is this activity moving me toward my long-term goal? If not, why am I doing it? Divided priorities quietly destroy outcomes. You cannot claim to want mastery while allocating minimal time to practice. You cannot claim to want wealth while avoiding financial literacy. Responsibility aligns daily behavior with stated ambition. Emotionally, accepting that nobody is coming can feel isolating. It removes the comfort of being discovered, but it also removes dependency. When you understand that progress depends primarily on your choices, you gain clarity. You stop waiting for perfect conditions. You start working with current ones. That mindset builds resilience. When setbacks occur, you adapt instead of collapsing. You ask, what can be improved instead of who can be blamed? In the end, responsibility is not a punishment. It is leverage. It shifts your focus from expectation to execution. It forces you to evaluate trade-offs consciously. It pushes you to invest in yourself even when no one is watching. And over time, that quiet investment becomes visible, not because someone rescued you, but because you stopped waiting. Most people do not fail because they lack intelligence or opportunity. They fail because they cannot stay committed long enough to see the return on their effort. They expect visible progress too soon. When results do not match effort immediately, emotion overrides strategy. Frustration replaces patience. Doubt replaces discipline. And what could have compounded into something meaningful is abandoned halfway through its growth cycle. Long-term vision is not glamorous. It is repetitive. It is often boring. It requires you to trust a process that offers very little external validation in the early stages. That is difficult because human psychology is wired for short-term feedback. We want reassurance that what we are doing is working. We want signs of progress. We want acknowledgement. When those signals are absent, the mind begins to question the plan, even if the plan is sound. Consider financial investing. The mathematics of compounding are simple. Small, consistent contributions grow slowly at first, almost invisibly. In the early years, the increase feels insignificant. It may even feel pointless compared to the effort of saving, but over time the curve bends. The growth accelerates not because the person suddenly changed strategy, but because they stayed consistent. If that investor checks their account daily and reacts emotionally to small fluctuations, they are likely to withdraw during downturns. Withdrawal interrupts compounding. Emotion, reaction, broken strategy, reduced outcome. Patience, consistency, compound, and exponential outcome. The difference lies in emotional discipline. This principle applies beyond money. Skill development follows the same pattern. The first months of learning a new craft feel uncomfortable and unrewarding. Progress is slow. Mistakes are frequent. Improvement is difficult to measure. Many quit during this stage because the discomfort feels like evidence of inadequacy. In reality, discomfort is evidence of growth. If they continue practicing deliberately, the improvement will become noticeable. But the mind prefers quick competence over long-term mastery. So they switch goals. They start something new. The cycle repeats. Years later, they have touched many things but mastered none. Long-term vision requires you to separate emotion from evaluation. A bad week does not invalidate a solid strategy. A temporary setback does not erase accumulated progress. But if your decisions are driven by how you feel in the moment, you will constantly reset your trajectory. Resetting destroys momentum. Momentum is built through continuity. Even modest effort, when sustained without interruption, produces meaningful change. Inconsistent bursts of intense effort followed by long gaps produce frustration. There is also the social pressure of comparison. You see others achieving visible milestones, promotions, purchases, public recognition. If your focus is long-term, your results may not be immediately visible. You might be investing quietly while others are spending visibly. You might be studying while others are socializing. In the short term, it can feel like you are missing out. That feeling is real. Delayed gratification is emotionally uncomfortable, but the trade-off must be examined honestly. Immediate pleasure often reduces future flexibility. Long-term discipline often increases future options. Relationships illustrate this clearly. A couple faces conflict. Resolving it requires patience, listening, and sometimes uncomfortable conversations. The short-term emotional impulse may be to withdraw or end the relationship to escape discomfort. That offers immediate relief. But long-term stability is built through working through tension, not avoiding it. Consistent effort to understand and grow together compounds trust. Impulsive decisions based on temporary emotion can dismantle something that required years to build. In career development, long-term vision means choosing roles that build skill rather than only chasing higher titles. It means accepting slower growth in exchange for deeper competence. Early in a career, a position that challenges you intensely may feel overwhelming. A safer role may feel more comfortable and prestigious. But if the challenging role builds rare capabilities, the long-term payoff can be substantial. Choosing comfort for status may limit your future ceiling. Choosing growth for substance may delay recognition but expand long-term leverage. Patience does not mean passivity. It means sustained, focused action guided by a clear objective. Without clarity, patience turns into stagnation. You must know what you are building toward. Long-term vision requires defining a direction, then aligning daily behavior with that direction. If your goal is financial independence, your spending, saving, and investing must reflect that. If your goal is mastery in a field, your daily schedule must allocate meaningful time to practice. Vision without disciplined execution is fantasy. There is also the discipline of ignoring noise. Markets fluctuate, opinions shift, trends emerge and disappear. If you constantly adjust your strategy based on external noise, you never give any approach enough time to work. This does not mean refusing to adapt. It means distinguishing between temporary volatility and fundamental change. That distinction requires calm thinking. Emotional reactivity leads to frequent course corrections. Frequent course corrections prevent compounding. Long-term thinking forces you to confront trade-offs clearly. You cannot maximize present comfort and future freedom simultaneously. You cannot spend aggressively and expect large investment returns. You cannot avoid difficult conversations and expect deep relationships. Every meaningful outcome requires sustained input over time. The inputs are often unremarkable. The outcomes, if you persist, appear remarkable to others who did not witness the repetition. Human behavior tends to overestimate what can be achieved quickly and underestimate what can be achieved steadily. This cognitive bias leads to impatience. When reality does not match inflated short-term expectations, disappointment follows. Disappointment then becomes justification to quit. If instead you adopt modest short-term expectations and ambitious long-term ones, your mindset shifts. You expect slow progress. You prepare for setbacks. You measure success and consistency rather than immediate results. The discipline to think long-term also strengthens identity. When you commit to a path and stay with it, despite temporary discomfort, you build self-trust. You begin to see yourself as someone who follows through. That self-image reinforces future discipline. Identity, behavior, outcome reinforced identity. Over time, patience becomes part of who you are, not something you struggle to practice. Short-term emotion is powerful but unstable. Long-term vision is quieter but durable. If you allow every temporary feeling to dictate permanent decisions, you will fragment your progress. If instead you anchor decisions to principles and accept emotional fluctuations as temporary, you create stability. Stability supports compounding. Compounding, whether in skills, finances, or relationships, is what separates average trajectories from exceptional ones. This isn't theoretical. Right now, someone your age is building habits that will define the next decade. Right now, someone with fewer resources is developing skills you keep postponing. Right now, opportunities are passing because you're distracted. It's happening. But here's the part that matters most. You can start happening too. Shift your attention, upgrade your environment, embrace discomfort, take full responsibility, commit to the long game, not loudly, not for validation, but strategically. Focus is rare. Discipline is rare. Long-term vision is rare. And rare things are valuable. 5 years from now, you won't regret the nights you worked on yourself. You won't regret the money you invested instead of wasted. You won't regret the boundaries you set. You'll regret the time you lost pretending you had more of it. So I'm telling you this because it's happening right now. The compounding, the positioning, The separation between those who drift and those who decide. Choose discipline over distraction. Choose sacrifice over comfort. Choose vision over impulse. Because the future doesn't respond to what you say you want. It responds to what you repeatedly do. And what you repeatedly do starting today will decide everything.